She's no longer in my home and not in my head either. So, are you two still happy after all these years? My cousin Beth asked at the Harper family reunion, her voice carrying that particular tone that suggested she already knew the answer would be complicated. Marcia didn't even look up from her potato salad. I regret this marriage daily, she said with a laugh that made everyone around the picnic table chuckle nervously. I matched her deadpan delivery perfectly. Me too. That's why I'm ending it. The laughter died instantly. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Uncle Jerry's beer can froze at his lips. What? Marta's head snapped up, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the afternoon sunlight. You heard me? I stood up, brushing crumbs off my khakis. I'm done pretending this works. The silence stretched like taffy until little cousin Emma started crying, probably sensing the adult tension. That's when I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But let me back up. Let me tell you how Evan Harper, 49-year-old finance manager for a mid-sized insurance company in Columbus, Ohio, became the kind of man who drops divorce bombs at family barbecues. 3 weeks earlier, I was still playing the role of the devoted husband. Marta worked at T-Bold Advertising downtown, pulling in more money than I did, which she reminded me of whenever we argued about expenses. She'd started staying late more often, coming home with stories about demanding clients and impossible deadlines. Jake's covering for me again, she'd say, tossing her purse on the kitchen counter. I don't know what I'd do without him. Jake Turnbull. The name came up a lot in our conversations. Jake helped with the Morrison account. Jake suggested a new restaurant for client dinners. Jake thought Marta should ask for a promotion. Sounds like Jake's got opinions about everything, I said one night, not looking up for my laptop where I was reviewing quarterly reports. He's just being supportive. You should try it sometime. That stung, but I let it slide. Marriage is full of little cuts, right? You develop scar tissue. The first real crack appeared when I found the credit card statement. Marta had always handled our finances, claiming she was better with numbers. Turns out she was better at hiding them too. Victoria's Secret, $347. A spa package, $520. Dinner at Morello's, $180. I'd never been to Morello's. Heck, I'd never even heard of it. Marta, I called from the kitchen table, statement in hand. What's this charge from last Tuesday? She appeared in the doorway, still in her work clothes, looking annoyed. What charge? Morello's $180. Client dinner. The Hendersons? They wanted somewhere upscale. Both of them what? Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. Both of them were there. She paused just long enough for me to notice. Of course. Why would you ask that? I didn't answer, but I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Marta's sister, Victoria, came to visit the following weekend. Victoria was everything Marcia used to be before responsibility and mortgages wore her down. Wild, impulsive, and completely self-absorbed. She worked in fashion in Chicago and treated marriage like a temporary inconvenience. God, Marta, you look amazing, Victoria gushed, examining her sister like she was shopping for a new outfit. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. They went out Saturday night, just the two of them. Sisters' night, Marta called it. They didn't get home until 3-1 in the morning, giggling like teenagers and trying to shush each other as they stumbled through the front door. I pretended to be asleep when Marta slipped into bed, reeking of cigarettes and some cologne I didn't recognize. She never smoked. I used to like that about her. Sunday morning, Victoria made coffee and started talking about some guy she'd met at the bar. He was so into you, Marta. I mean, completely smitten. Vic, stop. Marta shot a glance toward me, but I was hidden behind my newspaper, listening to every word. I'm just saying it's nice to see you having fun again. You've been so what? So married? They both laughed, but it wasn't the comfortable laugh of an inside joke. It was the nervous laugh of women sharing a secret they shouldn't be sharing. That's when I decided to do some detective work. I started small, checked our phone records online. We had a family plan so I could see everything. Marta had been texting someone with a 614 number about 50 times a day for the past 2 months. The number wasn't saved in her contacts, which meant she was being careful. A reverse lookup told me it belonged to Jake Turnbull, 50 texts a day, to her co-worker who was covering for her. I felt like an idiot, a 49-year-old idiot who'd been played by the oldest trick in the book. But I needed proof, real proof, not just suspicious phone records and mysterious credit card charges. The opportunity came when Marta announced she was going to a weekend conference in Cleveland. Team building, she explained. Jake's going too, along with most of the senior staff. Sounds expensive. The company's paying. It's at some resort on Lake Erie. I nodded and smiled and kissed her goodbye Friday morning like the trusting husband I was supposed to be. Then I called in sick and started my own weekend plans. Finding the resort wasn't hard. There were only 3 upscale places on Lake Erie that hosted corporate events. The second one I called confirmed they had a T-Bold advertising group checked in. The drive to Cleveland took 2 hours. I spent the time rehearsing what I'd say if I got caught, but mostly I just felt sick to my stomach. Part of me hoped I was wrong. Part of me hoped I'd find Martia in some boring conference room learning about market demographics and team synergy. I should have known better. The Shoreline Resort wasn't the kind of place you went for corporate team building. It was the kind of place you went when you wanted to impress someone you were sleeping with. Valet parking, marble lobby, the whole 9 yards. I parked across the street at a gas station and tried to figure out my next move. Walking into the lobby and asking for Marta Harper's room seemed like a good way to blow my cover before I learned anything useful. That's when I saw them. Martia and Jake emerged from the resort's main entrance, but they weren't dressed for business meetings. She wore a sundress I'd never seen before, something flowing and expensive looking. He had his hand on her lower back, guiding her toward a black BMW in the valet area. I followed them at a distance, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. They drove north along the lake for about 10 minutes before turning into a private drive marked with a discreet sign. Mills Lake Estate, private property. The estate sat on about 20 acres of prime lakefront, hidden behind tall pine trees and a stone wall that probably cost more than my annual salary. I parked on the road and walked along the perimeter until I found a spot where I could climb over without being seen. My plan was simple: get close enough to see what was really going on, take some photos with my phone, and get out. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The main house was a sprawling modern thing, all glass and steel, with a deck that stretched out over the water. There had to be 30 people there, and none of them looked like they were discussing quarterly projections. I crept through the trees until I could see the deck clearly. Marty was there laughing at something a man in a polo shirt was saying. Not Jake, someone else entirely. Victoria was there too, which explained how this whole thing had gotten started. But it was what I saw next that made my stomach drop. Martia kissed the polo shirt guy. Not a friendly peck, but a full-on hands in his hair. This is definitely not my husband kiss. I fumbled for my phone, trying to get the camera app open without taking my eyes off the scene. That's when I heard the footsteps behind me. Hey, what the heck are you doing? I spun around to find a security guard, probably 6'4", and built like he spent his off hours throwing people out of bars. You were just trespassing on private property. He had a radio in one hand and was reaching for it with the other. Stay right there. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran like my life depended on it. Through the trees, over fallen logs, branches whipping at my face while the security guard crashed through the underbrush behind me, shouting into his radio. I made it to the wall and scrambled over, tearing my shirt on the stone and probably looking like I'd been attacked by a very angry cat. My car was 50 yards away and I could hear more voices coming from the estate. I drove back to Columbus in a daze, my mind racing faster than my Honda Civic ever could. Martia wasn't just cheating. She was part of some kind of lifestyle I didn't even understand, with people who had enough money to rent entire estates for weekend parties. And Victoria was the one who'd introduced her to it. I got home before Martia did on Sunday, which gave me time to clean up the scratches on my face and come up with a story about falling off a ladder while cleaning gutters. When she walked through the door at 6am, she looked perfectly composed, like she'd spent the weekend in conference rooms instead of making out with strangers at lakeside parties. How was the team building? I asked. Boring, she said without missing a beat. Lots of PowerPoint presentations and trust exercises. Jake says hi. That's nice of him. She went upstairs to shower, and I sat in my kitchen staring at the blurry photos on my phone. They weren't great evidence, too far away, not clear enough to prove anything in court, but they were enough to confirm what I already knew. My marriage was over. Had been over for months probably. I was just the last one to find out. The question now was what to do about it. I could confront her directly, but that would just lead to denials and gaslighting. I could file for divorce quietly, but that felt like letting her win. She'd already humiliated me by carrying on this affair right under my nose. The least I could do was return the favor. That's when I remembered something Victoria had said during her visit. It's nice to see you having fun again. Again, like this wasn't the first time. I spent the next week digging deeper. Bank records, phone logs, social media posts. Marta had been very careful, but Victoria hadn't. Her Instagram was full of photos from parties and events. And if you looked closely, you could spot Martia in the background of several shots from the past few months, always with different men. always looking like she was having the time of her life. The final piece fell into place when I found the pregnancy test. It was hidden in the back of Marta's underwear drawer, wrapped in tissue paper like some kind of precious artifact. 2 pink lines, clear as day. We hadn't had love in 3 months. I sat on our bed holding the test in my trembling hands and felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion crystallized into something much more focused. Anger, pure, clean, righteous anger. Marcia had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. The Harper family reunion continued around us, but the festive atmosphere had died completely. My announcement hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, impossible to ignore and getting worse by the minute. Evan, what are you talking about? Marta's voice had gone up an octave, the way it did when she was trying to control a situation that was slipping away from her. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. I looked around the table at my relatives, all of them frozen with forks halfway to their mouths. But since we're all family here, why don't you tell everyone about Jake? Uncle Jerry sat down his beer. Maybe we should. No, Jerry, let's not. I kept my eyes on Marcia. Let's talk about how my wife has been spending her evenings and weekends and probably lunch hours. Marta's face had gone pale, but Victoria was turning red. You don't know what you're talking about, Evan. You're embarrassing yourself. Am I? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of the photos I'd taken at the lake house. It was blurry, but you could clearly see Marcia in her sundress, very close to a man who definitely wasn't me. Because I think the only embarrassing thing here is how long it took me to figure it out. You followed me. Marta's voice was barely a whisper. I followed my wife to what I thought was a business conference. Imagine my surprise when I found a party instead. Victoria stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the concrete patio. This is ridiculous, Marcia. You don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Victoria. The steel in my voice surprised even me. You're the one who got her into this mess, so you get to watch me clean it up. Evan, please. Marty reached across the table, but I pulled my hand away. Can we talk about this privately? Privately? Like you've been talking to Jake privately? Or like you've been talking to Polo Shirt Guy privately? Who? The guy from last weekend? The one you were kissing on the deck while your husband was at home, thinking you were learning about market demographics? The silence was deafening. Even the kids had stopped playing in the yard, sensing that something important and terrible was happening at the adults' table. My cousin Beth cleared her throat. Maybe we should give you two some space. No. I looked around the table at faces I'd known my whole life. These people deserve to know what kind of person they've been welcoming into their family for 15 years. Marta finally found her voice. Stop it. You're being cruel. Cruel. I laughed and it sounded bitter even to me. Marcia, I found the pregnancy test. The words hit the table like a bomb. Victoria actually gasped. Uncle Jerry's beer can slipped from his fingers and clattered onto his plate. What pregnancy test? Beth asked, looking between us. Marta's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. No sound came out. The one hidden in her underwear drawer, I continued. 2 pink lines. Very exciting news, except we haven't had love since March. Oh my God, Aunt Linda whispered. So congratulations, everyone. Mart's pregnant, just not with my baby. Victoria slammed her palm on the table. You bastard! You complete bastard. I'm the bastard. I stood up, my chair falling backward. I'm not the one who's been screwing around for months. I'm not the one who brought my sister to partner-swapping parties. And I'm sure as heck not the one who got pregnant by some random guy at a lake house. It's not random, Marta said quietly. The admission hung in the air like a confession. What? I leaned forward. It's not random. It's Jake's. More silence. Longer this time. Jake's? I repeated. Your co-worker Jake. The one who's been covering for you. She nodded, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. The one who's married with 2 kids. Another nod. I looked around the table at my family. People who'd known me since I was Emma's age. People who'd celebrated my wedding to Marcia. People who'd always treated her like one of their own. Well, I said finally, I guess that settles it. I walked away from the table, through the backyard and out to my car. Behind me, I could hear voices rising, Victoria yelling, Marta crying, my relatives trying to process what they just witnessed. I drove home in silence, my hands steady on the wheel for the first time in weeks. The anger was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't the wild, desperate fury I'd felt when I found the pregnancy test. This was something colder, more focused. Marcia had humiliated me in front of strangers. Now I'd returned the favor with our family. But I wasn't done, not even close. Jake Turnbull was married, had been for 12 years, according to the company directory I'd memorized. His wife was named Kate, and they had 2 children, a boy and a girl, ages 8 and 10. Kate deserved to know what her husband had been up to. just like I deserved to know what my wife had been up to. The difference was, I was going to make sure she found out. Finding Kate Turnbull wasn't difficult. People put their entire lives on social media these days, and Jake's wife was no exception. Her Facebook page was a catalogue of suburban motherhood school events, family vacations, dinner parties with other couples who looked just like them. She worked part-time as a dental hygienist and volunteered at her kids' school. Her profile picture showed her with Jake at what looked like a company Christmas party, both of them smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. I felt sorry for her. She had no idea what was coming, but she deserved the truth, just like I had. I drove to Cleveland on a Wednesday morning, calling in sick again. Kate worked at a dental practice in West Lake, according to her LinkedIn profile. I waited in the parking lot until lunchtime, then followed her to a sandwich shop 2 blocks away. She was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'3", with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and scrubs decorated with cartoon teeth. She looked tired, the way parents of young children always look tired. I approached her table while she was checking her phone. "Excuse me, are you Kate Turnbull?" She looked up, confused, but not alarmed. "Yes, my name is Evan Harper. I think we need to talk about our spouses." The confusion deepened. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" I sat down across from her without being invited. "My wife works with your husband at T-Bold Advertising. Marta Harper." Recognition flickered across her face. "Oh, Jake mentions Marta sometimes. You're her husband." "I am, or I was. It's complicated." Kate set down her phone, giving me her full attention. Something in my tone must have warned her that this wasn't a social call. "What's going on?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos from the lake house. They were still blurry, but clear enough to show Marta and Jake together, his hand on her back, both of them looking very comfortable with each other. "These were taken last weekend at a resort in Cleveland. Jake told you he was at a company conference, right?" Kate stared at the photos, her sandwich forgotten. Yes, team building. There was no conference, just a party. A very private party." I swiped to the next photo showing Marta kissing the other man, while Jake watched from nearby. "Your husband has been having an affair with my wife for at least 3 months, probably longer." Kate's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally devastation. She understood what she was seeing. "No," she whispered. "Jake wouldn't. We've been together since college. We have children. I know. I'm sorry." I pulled out a manila envelope I'd prepared and set it on the table between us. Phone records showing 50 to 60 text messages a day between them. Credit card receipts from restaurants and hotels. A pregnancy test I found in my wife's drawer. Kate's hand flew to her mouth. "Pregnant? She's carrying Jake's baby. Maybe babies. She mentioned twins at our family reunion." The color drained from Kate's face completely. She looked like she might pass out. "I know this is a shock," I continued. "It was for me too, but I thought you deserved to know the truth." Kate opened the envelope with shaking hands and spread the contents across the table. Phone records, credit card statements, printed emails I'd recovered from Marta's laptop. I'd been thorough. "How long have you known?" she asked without looking up. "I started suspecting 3 weeks ago. Got confirmation at the reunion on Sunday when Marta admitted it in front of our entire family. She admitted it in public. She didn't have much choice. I made it clear the conversation was happening whether she participated or not." Kate was quiet for a long time, studying the evidence. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but dry. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just thought you should know. Bees." Her voice was stronger now, with an edge I hadn't expected. "Nobody drives 2 hours to deliver news like this without wanting something. What is it?" I respected her directness. "I want Jake to face consequences for what he's done, the same way Marta is facing consequences. And you think I'm going to help you get revenge on my husband? I think you're going to do whatever you think is best for you and your children. But yes, I hope that involves making Jake's life as complicated as he's made ours." Kate gathered up the papers and photos, stuffing them back into the envelope. "I need to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need." I stood to leave, then paused. "Kate, for what it's worth, I really am sorry. You seem like a good person. You don't deserve this." "Neither did you," she said quietly. I drove back to Columbus feeling like I'd lit a very long fuse. Now all I had to do was wait for the explosion. I didn't have to wait long. Jake called me at work the next morning, his voice tight with panic. "What the heck did you do?" "Good morning to you too, Jake. How's the weather in Cleveland?" "You son of a witch. You went to see Kate?" "I did. Lovely woman." "You're a lucky man." She threw me out. "I'm staying at a hotel. That's unfortunate. Maybe you should have thought about that before you got my wife pregnant." There was a long pause. When Jake spoke again, his voice was different. Desperate. Look, Evan, I know you're angry, but this doesn't have to get ugly. We can work something out. Work something out, like what? I'll end things with Marta. Clean break. You never hear from me again. Too late for that, don't you think? She's having your baby. We don't know that for sure. She seemed pretty sure at the family reunion. Another pause. What do you want? I want you to experience exactly what I experienced. The humiliation, the betrayal, the moment when you realize everyone around you knows something you don't. I get it. Okay, you're pissed, but Kate didn't do anything wrong. Neither did my kids. You should have thought about that before you started screwing my wife. I hung up and went back to my quarterly reports, feeling better than I had in months. But I wasn't done with Jake Turnbull. Not by a long shot. Kate Turnbull turned out to be a woman of action. By Friday afternoon, half of Cleveland knew about Jake's affair. And by Monday morning, the news had spread to Columbus. It started with Kate showing up at T-Bold Advertising's main office with a box of Jake's belongings and a very loud voice. According to my source, Marta's former friend, Jennifer, who called me with barely concealed glee, Kate marched into the lobby and demanded to speak with Jake immediately. She wasn't screaming or crying, Jennifer reported. She was just cold, like ice cold. She had these papers in her hand, and she kept waving them around, talking about evidence and documentation. Jake tried to get Kate to come into a conference room, but she refused. Right there in the lobby in front of clients and co-workers, she laid out everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the lies about business trips. Then she threw his stuff at him, Jennifer continued, her voice gleeful. Not violently, just methodically. Shirts, ties, that stupid coffee mug he was always drinking from. One item at a time while she talked about how long they'd been married and how he was throwing away his family for a co-worker. The whole thing was recorded by someone's phone and posted to social media within hours. By evening, it had been shared hundreds of times. But Kate wasn't finished. She'd also printed out copies of all the evidence I'd given her and distributed them to Jake's friends, neighbors, and co-workers. Phone records, hotel receipts, even screenshots of text messages she'd found on Jake's phone after confronting him. Jake's reputation was in ruins. His boss called him into a meeting about maintaining professional standards. His neighbors stopped waving when he drove by. His kids' friends' parents started asking awkward questions at school pickup. The best part was that none of it was illegal or even unethical. Kate was simply telling the truth to people who deserved to know it. Meanwhile, Marta was dealing with her own fallout. Our mutual friends had started choosing sides, and most of them weren't choosing hers. The Harper family had always been close-knit, and my cousins and aunts and uncles were not taking kindly to someone who'd humiliated one of their own at a family gathering. Marta's parents called her, demanding explanations. Her co-workers started treating her differently. Even Victoria had gone quiet, probably realizing that her role in encouraging Marta's affair wasn't going to stay secret much longer. But the real blow came when Marta tried to reconcile with Jake. According to Jennifer, who was proving to be an excellent source of gossip, Marta had driven to Cleveland to see Jake at his hotel. She'd apparently convinced herself that they could weather the storm together, maybe even start a new life somewhere else. Jake had other ideas. He told her it was over. Jennifer reported during one of our coffee meetings, said he couldn't lose his kids over this, and if he had any chance of getting Kate back, he needed to cut all ties with Marta immediately. How do you know all this? Marta called me crying. She wanted someone to feel sorry for her, I guess. Wrong number. Jennifer had been friends with both of us for years, but she'd made her position clear after the reunion. I always liked you better anyway, she told me. Marta was getting too full of herself. The pregnancy complicated everything. Of course, Jake couldn't completely disappear while Marta was carrying his child, but he could make it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her beyond basic parental responsibilities, which left Marta alone, pregnant, and facing the collapse of everything she'd built. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. But then, I remembered the months of lies, the secret phone calls, the way she'd looked at me like I was an idiot while she was planning her next rendezvous with Jake. My sympathy evaporated pretty quickly. The divorce proceedings started in earnest. I'd hired a good lawyer, not the most expensive one in town, but someone with a reputation for being thorough and aggressive when necessary. Marta tried to claim that our marriage had been troubled for years, that we'd grown apart naturally, that the affair was just a symptom of deeper problems. My lawyer presented evidence of her deception, the hidden credit card charges, the lies about business trips, the pregnancy that proved she'd been unfaithful. In Ohio, adultery doesn't automatically affect property division, but it can influence spousal support decisions. And when one spouse has been systematically lying and hiding assets, judges tend to take a dim view of their credibility. Marta's lawyer advised her to settle quickly and quietly. But I wasn't interested in quiet anymore. I want this to go to trial. I told my lawyer, Evan, that's expensive and time-consuming. We can get you a good settlement without I don't care about the money. I want everything on the public record. Every lie, every deception, every hotel receipt. I want anyone who searches her name online to find exactly what kind of person she is. My lawyer looked at me carefully. You sure about this? Once it's public, there's no taking it back. I'm sure because Martia had made her choices in public, at parties, in hotels, in front of co-workers and strangers. She'd humiliated me in front of people who mattered to me. Now it was her turn. The trial was scheduled for a rainy Thursday in October, but the final confrontation came 3 days earlier when Jake made one last desperate attempt to salvage his situation. I was working late at the office trying to finish the quarterly reports that had been neglected during all the drama, when security called to tell me I had a visitor in the lobby. Jake Turnbull looked like heck. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt was wrinkled, and he had the hollowed-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping much. We need to talk, he said without preamble. No, we don't. 5 minutes, please. I looked at him for a long moment, then nodded toward the conference room. 5 minutes. Jake closed the door behind us and immediately started pacing. This has gone too far, Evan. Way too far, has it? Kate filed for divorce. She's asking for full custody of the kids. My lawyer says she's got a good case because of the adultery evidence. That's unfortunate. My boss is talking about reassigning me to the Detroit office, basically exiling me until this all blows over. Sounds like consequences. Jake stopped pacing and faced me directly. What do you want? Money? I'll pay you whatever you think this is worth. Just make it stop. Make what stop? The public humiliation, the character assassination, the systematic destruction of my life. I almost laughed. Jake, I haven't destroyed anything. I just told people the truth. You orchestrated this whole thing, getting Kate involved, feeding information to Marta's friends, pushing for a public trial instead of a quiet settlement. Guilty as charged. Why? What's the point? You've already won. Marta's miserable. I'm losing everything. Our careers are in ruins. What more do you want? I leaned back in my chair and studied him. Jake was younger than me, better looking, more successful, the kind of man who'd always gotten what he wanted without having to work too hard for it. Do you know what the worst part was? I asked. What? Not the affair itself, not even the pregnancy. It was the way you both looked at me like I was stupid, like I was this pathetic, oblivious husband who deserved what was happening to him. Jake's face flushed. You did. Every time Marta came home with another story about Jake this and Jake that, she was laughing at me. Every time you covered for her at work, you were both laughing at the idiot husband who believed your lies. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. So now you get to know how it feels. Jake sat down heavily in the chair across from me. My kids won't even talk to me. Emma, my daughter. She asked Kate if I was a bad person. What am I supposed to say to that? You could try the truth. The truth is that I made a mistake. A big stupid mistake that I regret every day. Do you? Of course I do. Because 3 weeks ago, you were planning to leave Kate for Marta. You were talking about starting a new life together, raising your baby together. Jake's mouth opened and closed. How do you know that? Because Marta told people. She was excited about it. She thought you were her knight in shining armor, come to rescue her from her boring marriage. That was before you realized there would be consequences. Before Kate threw you out and your boss threatened to fire you and your neighbors started looking at you like you were a piece of garbage. I stood up. Your 5 minutes are up. Wait. Jake jumped to his feet. Please, there has to be something I can do to fix this. There is what? Live with what you've done. Accept the consequences of your choices. Stop trying to minimize the damage and start figuring out how to be a better person. That's it. That's your advice? That's my advice. Jake stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. You're enjoying this. I am. That's sick, Evan. That's really sick. You know what's sick? Sleeping with someone else's wife while your own wife is home taking care of your children. You know what's sick? Getting someone pregnant and then abandoning them when things get complicated. I didn't abandon. You told Marcia it was over the minute your comfortable life was threatened. You threw her away like garbage the second it became inconvenient to keep her around. Jake's face crumpled. I know I did. I hate myself for it. Good. That's a start. I walked toward the door, then paused. Jake, for what it's worth, I hope you figure out how to fix things with your kids. They don't deserve to pay for your mistakes. What about Kate? Kate deserves better than you. She always did. I left him sitting in the conference room and went back to my quarterly reports. The trial lasted 2 days. Everything came out. The affair, the lies, the pregnancy, the financial deception. Local newspapers covered it because it involved a prominent advertising agency, and the story got picked up by a few online publications. Marta's name was permanently linked to words like adultery and deception in the public record. I got the house, most of our assets, and no obligation to pay spousal support. Marta got her freedom and a baby she'd have to raise alone. Jake got transferred to Detroit and lost custody of his children. Kate got a fresh start in full support of her community. And me, I got something I'd never expected. Peace. Not happiness that would take time, but peace. The anger that had consumed me for months was finally gone, replaced by something calmer and more sustainable. Justice. 6 months later, I ran into Jennifer at the grocery store. She told me that Marcia had moved back in with her parents and was working at a small marketing firm in Dayton. The baby, a boy, was healthy, and Jake was paying child support, but had no visitation rights. She asks about you sometimes, Jennifer said. What does she ask? If you're seeing anyone, if you seem happy, if you ever mention her. And what do you tell her? I tell her you're doing fine and that you never mention her at all. Jennifer smiled. Because that's the truth, isn't it? It was the truth. I really never mentioned Marcia anymore. She'd become irrelevant to my life, which was probably the worst punishment of all. I finished my shopping and drove home to the house that was finally completely mine. No more secrets, no more lies, no more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Just peace and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes if you're patient and methodical and willing to let the truth do the heavy lifting, justice actually wins.